The fake funeral. The words came out so innocently that Steve Harvey almost didn't catch the full significance of what had just been said. My mom saves dead people. 18-year-old Rachel Thompson had answered with the matter-of-fact tone that teenagers use when they think they're stating something obvious. But the look of absolute horror that flashed across her mother's face told everyone in the studio that this wasn't just a case of poor word choice. This was something much more complicated, much more dangerous, and much more heartbreaking. 42-year-old Lisa Thompson, a paramedic with 15 years of experience, stood frozen at the family podium, staring at her daughter with an expression that cycled through panic, shame, and desperate fear. "Rachel," she whispered, her voice barely audible, even with the microphone. "What did you just say?" It started as another Thursday afternoon taping in Atlanta. The Thompson family from Denver faced off against the Martinez family from San Diego. Lisa Thompson was exactly the kind of person Steve Harvey loved having on the show. Professional, articulate, with the kind of steady presence that comes from years of handling emergencies. She wore her paramedic uniform with pride, the patches and badges telling the story of someone who had dedicated her life to saving others. But there was something about her that caught Steve's attention immediately. A hypervigilance in her eyes, the way she constantly scanned the studio as if checking for threats that nobody else could see. Rachel stood beside her mother, and everything about their dynamic suggested a relationship that had been strained by something neither of them wanted to discuss. Rachel kept glancing at her mother with a mixture of love and concern that seemed too mature for an 18-year-old. During family introductions, Steve had been immediately impressed by Lisa's credentials. "Oh, and who do we have here?" Steve had asked, approaching their podium with his trademark warmth. "I'm Lisa Thompson, and this is my daughter, Rachel. I'm a paramedic with Denver Emergency Medical Services." "A paramedic? We've got a real-life hero here, folks. How long have you been saving lives, Lisa?" 15 years, Lisa had replied, but there was something hollow in her voice, something that didn't match the pride typically associated with such a noble profession. 15 years? That's incredible. Rachel, you must be so proud of your mom." Rachel had looked at her mother with an expression that held more worry than pride. "I am proud of her," Rachel had said carefully. "She works really hard to help people." It was a sweet answer, but Steve noticed the careful way Rachel had phrased it, as if she was choosing her words very deliberately. Now, 3 rounds into the game, that moment was about to explode into something that would reveal just how much trauma one person could carry while trying to save others. The Thompson family was holding their own, tied with the Martinez family heading into the 4th round. Steve was in his element, making jokes about Grandmother Thompson's surprisingly strategic thinking and Uncle Robert's tendency to give medical advice for every question. The category was jobs that help people. It was Rachel's turn at the podium. She had stepped forward with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted to say. "All right, Rachel, jobs that help people. What do you think?" Rachel looked directly at her mother, then back at Steve. "Paramedic," she said, her voice strong but carrying an undertone that made Steve pause. The answer was number 2 on the board, worth 18 points. The Thompson family should have been celebrating, but Rachel hadn't moved from the microphone. She was staring at her mother with an expression that carried years of unspoken concern. "Rachel," Steve said, approaching the podium. "Paramedic. Good answer. Your mom's job. Tell me about what she does." That's when it happened. Rachel looked directly at Steve, then at her mother, then back at Steve. When she spoke, her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been watching a loved one suffer in silence. "My mom saves dead people." The studio fell into confused silence. Several audience members looked around, trying to understand what had just been said. Steve's smile faded slightly. "I'm sorry, what now? Save dead people? She brings them back to life. At least, she tries to. She works at the hospital morgue now, trying to revive people who have already died." The words hit the studio like a physical force. Lisa's face went completely white. "Rachel," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "That's not... You don't understand." "Mom, you've been doing this for 5 years, ever since the accident." Steve Harvey had witnessed countless unexpected moments over his career, but this was something entirely new. This sounded like a daughter describing her mother's complete break from reality. "Ladies, I'm going to need you to help me understand what's happening here. Lisa looked around the studio with growing desperation, as if searching for an escape route. She doesn't understand, Lisa said quickly. She's confused about what I do. But Rachel shook her head firmly. Mom, I've followed you to work. I've seen you in the morgue trying to do CPR on people who have been dead for hours. The security guards know you. They let you in because they feel sorry for you. The studio audience was beginning to murmur with concern. This wasn't confusion. This was a description of someone who had lost touch with reality. Steve held up his hand for quiet. The studio fell silent. Lisa, Steve said gently, where do you work? Lisa's composure began to crack. I'm a paramedic. I save lives. I bring people back. But Rachel is saying you work in a morgue? Sometimes people look dead, but they're not really dead. Sometimes they just need someone to try harder, someone who won't give up on them. The implications of this statement hit everyone in the studio simultaneously. This wasn't about confusion or miscommunication. This was about a paramedic who had suffered some kind of traumatic break that left her unable to distinguish between life and death. Behind the scenes, a producer made a decision that would define this moment forever. Keep the cameras rolling. Let America witness what untreated trauma can do to the people who dedicate their lives to saving others. Lisa, Steve said, his voice incredibly gentle. When did this start? Lisa looked at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. 5 years ago, there was an accident. A family of 4 in a car crash. I was the first responder. The studio was completely silent now. The father was dead on impact. The mother died in the ambulance. The 2 children, Lisa's voice broke. The 2 children died in my arms. I couldn't save any of them. Rachel stepped closer to her mother. That's when it started. She began seeing dead people and thinking she could still save them. Steve's expression had completely transformed. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was witnessing the aftermath of profound trauma. Lisa, what do you see when you look at people in the morgue? I see patients who need help. I see people who aren't really gone, who just need someone to try harder to not give up on them. But Lisa, Steve said gently, those people are deceased. They can't be saved. Everyone said the family couldn't be saved either, but I should have tried harder. I should have found a way. The studio audience was openly emotional now. This wasn't about delusion. This was about survivor's guilt so profound that it had distorted reality. Rachel spoke up, her voice shaking. Mr. Harvey, my mom hasn't worked as a real paramedic in 5 years. She lost her license after she tried to perform CPR on a patient who had been declared dead for 3 hours. Lisa looked at her daughter with confusion and pain. But I have to try. Rachel, what if they're not really dead? What if I give up on someone who could still be saved? Steve Harvey had hosted thousands of shows, but this was uncharted territory. This was mental health crisis playing out in real time. Lisa, what does your day look like? What do you do when you go to work? I go to the hospital. I check on the patients who need the most help, the ones other people have given up on. The morgue patients, Rachel clarified quietly. And what do you do there? I try to bring them back. I use CPR. I talk to them. I tell them it's going to be okay. Sometimes it takes hours, but I don't give up. The studio was deathly quiet. Everyone was witnessing someone who had been so traumatized by loss that they had created an alternate reality where death wasn't permanent. Lisa, Steve said, when was the last time you actually saved someone who was alive? Lisa thought for a long moment, her face showing confusion. I try every day. I work so hard every day. But Mom, Rachel said gently, you haven't saved anyone in 5 years. The people you're trying to help are already gone. That's when Lisa's composure broke completely. But I have to try, she cried. What if everyone's wrong? What if there's still a chance? What if I stop trying and someone who could have lived dies because I gave up? Steve Harvey stepped closer to both women. Lisa, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are a hero. You saved countless lives during your 15 years as a paramedic. But what happened 5 years ago, that family you couldn't save, that wasn't your fault, but I should have done more. I should have tried harder. Lisa, even heroes can't save everyone. Even the best paramedics in the world lose patience. That doesn't make you a failure. Steve turned to address the studio audience. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing here is what untreated trauma can do to our first responders. Lisa has been carrying guilt and responsibility that no one person should carry. But Steve wasn't done. He pulled out his cell phone and, without asking permission from producers, started making calls. "What are you doing, Mr. Harvey?" Rachel asked. "I'm calling specialists. I'm calling people who help first responders deal with trauma, because your mother needs help and she deserves help." The first call was to Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychologist who specialized in first responder PTSD.
"Dr. Williams, this is Steve Harvey. I have a paramedic here who's been suffering from what perceives to be a severe trauma response for 5 years. She needs immediate help."
The conversation lasted several minutes, with Steve taking notes on the back of his game cards. The second call was to a treatment center that specifically worked with emergency services personnel. "I need someone who understands what happens when people who save lives can't save the ones that matter most to them." With each phone call, the studio audience grew more focused. They were witnessing an intervention that could save a life. After the third call, Steve turned to Lisa. "Lisa, I've connected you with specialists who understand exactly what you're going through. People who help paramedics and firefighters and police officers who've seen too much." Lisa looked confused. "But what about my patients? What about the people who need me?" "Lisa," Steve said gently, "the people who need you most are the living, starting with Rachel, starting with yourself." Rachel stepped forward. "Mom, I need you to get better. I need you to come back to reality. I need my real mom back." "But Rachel, I'm trying to save people." "Mom, you can't save dead people, but you can save yourself, and you can be there for me." Steve addressed Lisa directly. "Lisa, what would the family from 5 years ago want for you? Would they want you to spend the rest of your life trying to undo something that can't be undone?" Lisa thought about this for a long moment. "They would want me to keep helping people. Living people, Lisa, people who can actually be helped." For the first time in the conversation, Lisa seemed to have a moment of clarity. "Mr. Harvey, am I sick?" "You're hurt, Lisa. You've been carrying trauma that's too heavy for one person to carry alone, but hurt can be healed." The episode, when it aired 8 weeks later, became a catalyst for discussions about first responder, mental health, and the hidden costs of saving lives. Emergency services departments across the country began implementing mandatory counseling programs for personnel who experienced traumatic losses. More importantly, Lisa's story sparked awareness about how untreated PTSD can manifest in ways that look like mental illness, but are actually profound grief responses. Lisa entered intensive therapy immediately after the taping. The treatment was long and difficult, but she gradually began to distinguish between her trauma memories and present reality. 6 months later, she appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show with Rachel to share her recovery progress. "The hardest thing to accept," Lisa said during the interview, "was that I wasn't helping anyone. I thought I was being dedicated, but I was just avoiding the pain of accepting that sometimes we lose people." Rachel added, "The real mom I remembered started coming back when she stopped trying to bring back people who were already gone." Steve learned something that day that changed how he approaches every unexpected revelation on his stage. He learned that sometimes the people who dedicate their lives to saving others need saving themselves, and that trauma can create realities that feel completely real to the person experiencing them. Lisa eventually returned to work, not as a paramedic, but as a counselor for other first responders dealing with trauma. "I can't save dead people," she often tells the emergency personnel she counsels, "but I can help save the living people who are struggling with loss." Steve Harvey still keeps a photo on his desk from Lisa's follow-up appearance. It shows Lisa and Rachel together, both smiling with clear eyes and genuine happiness. The note attached reads, "Mr. Harvey, thank you for helping me learn the difference between saving people and saving myself. Reality is harder than my delusions were, but it's also more beautiful." Because sometimes the people who spend their lives rescuing others need rescuing themselves. Sometimes dedication becomes obsession, and heroism becomes a prison built from trauma. But sometimes someone has the courage to stop a game show and start a conversation that saves a life. The fake funeral was over. The real healing had begun, and Lisa learned that the most important person she could save was herself. That's not just good television. That's the power of recognition, intervention, and the understanding that heroes are human, and humans sometimes break in ways that look like strength but feel like drowning, because saving others is noble. But saving yourself is necessary, and that's a lesson worth more than any game show prize could ever offer. The episode, when it aired 8 weeks later, became a catalyst for discussions about first responder mental health and the hidden costs of saving lives. Emergency services departments across the country began implementing mandatory counseling programs for personnel who experienced traumatic losses. More importantly, Lisa's story sparked awareness about how untreated PTSD can manifest in ways that look like dedication but are actually profound grief responses. Lisa entered intensive therapy immediately after the taping. The treatment was long and difficult, but she gradually began to distinguish between her trauma memories and present reality. 6 months later, she appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show with Rachel to share her recovery progress. The hardest thing to accept, Lisa said during the interview, was that I wasn't helping anyone. I thought I was being dedicated, but I was just avoiding the pain of accepting that sometimes we lose people. Rachel added, "The real mom I remembered started coming back when she stopped trying to bring back people who were already gone." Steve learned something that day that changed how he approaches every unexpected revelation on his stage. He learned that sometimes the people who dedicate their lives to saving others need saving themselves, and that trauma can create realities that feel completely real to the person experiencing them. Lisa eventually returned to work, not as a paramedic, but as a counselor for other first responders dealing with trauma. "I can't save dead people," she often tells the emergency personnel she counsels, "but I can help save the living people who are struggling with loss." Steve Harvey still keeps a photo on his desk from Lisa's follow-up appearance. It shows Lisa and Rachel together, both smiling with clear eyes and genuine happiness. The note attached reads, "Mr. Harvey, thank you for helping me learn the difference between saving people and saving myself. Reality is harder than my delusions were, but it's also more beautiful. Because sometimes the people who spend their lives rescuing others need rescuing themselves. Sometimes dedication becomes obsession, and heroism becomes a prison built from trauma. But sometimes someone has the courage to stop a game show and start a conversation that saves a life. The fake funeral was over. The real healing had begun." And Lisa learned that the most important person she could save was herself. That's not just good television. That's the power of recognition, intervention, and the understanding that heroes are human, and humans sometimes break in ways that look like strength but feel like drowning.